Hello everyone, and welcome to my General Hospital Today channel. Sidwell burst into tears of regret when Britt finally choked out the words that Dalton was his biological son, an admission that shattered the last remnants of emotional armor he carried and sent shockwaves through the already fractured web of deception surrounding Port Charles. It was a revelation Britt herself could barely process. Her voice shook, her hands trembled, and her entire world seemed to spin as Sidwell's face drained of color, then twisted with a pain so raw that even Pascal stepped back in stunned silence. The moment Dalton's name left her lips, Britt's meltdown began, a spiraling flood of fear, guilt, and panic that had been building ever since she watched Jen Sidwell pull the trigger and send Professor Henry Hank Dalton collapsing onto his living room floor. Britt had known she was in danger from the moment Dalton died, but this new revelation exploded with consequences she had never anticipated. She had believed Sidwell viewed Dalton merely as a liability, a loose end in their cold fusion research who threatened to bring their entire covert operation crashing down, but now she understood the truth in its horrifying entirety. Sidwell hadn't just executed a colleague, he had unknowingly killed his own flesh and blood, and that grief was spiraling into something unstable and potentially catastrophic. Britt's meltdown only worsened when Harrison Chase revealed to Alexis Davis that he had evidence proving Michael Corinthos lied about his alibi the night Dalton disappeared, adding yet another explosive layer to a case that was already a nuclear disaster waiting to erupt. Chase's calm, measured voice contrasted sharply with Britt's frantic pacing and uncontrollable sobs, but his news carried weight. If Michael's alibi fell apart publicly, the entire Corinthos family could be thrust into a legal firestorm. As this chaos brewed, Sonny Corinthos was simultaneously attempting to reason with Giovanni Gio Palmieri, warning the younger man that the situation around Dalton's death was turning volatile fast, and if Gio wasn't careful, he could end up tangled in a storm he had no ability to control. Sonny tried to keep a level tone, but fear crept into his voice as he told Gio that the DA, Rick Lansing, was already sharpening knives and circling like a vulture looking for a headline. Meanwhile, Britt, emotionally shattered and barely holding herself upright, replayed Dalton's final moments on an endless loop in her mind, hearing the echo of the gunshot, seeing the blood spreading across his chest, and feeling the cold terror of knowing she could easily be next if she made one wrong move. Pascal had escorted her home after Dalton was shot, offering no comfort but a very clear threat: keep quiet or end up like Dalton. The warning rattled her bones, and when Jason Morgan arrived demanding answers, Britt finally cracked. Through tears she confessed to Jason, "I need to know that you're worth me risking my life." The line wasn't dramatic exaggeration, it was the most honest thing she'd said in months. She was inches from blowing the entire secret operation wide open, but she needed assurance that Jason was fully prepared to protect her from the monster she now knew Sidwell could become. At the same time, she couldn't stop thinking about Rocco Falconeri, once the only innocent child caught in Dalton's fabricated narrative about the PCU lab break-in, but now joined by Charlotte Cassadine and Danny Morgan, who had confessed their involvement in an attempt to dismantle Dalton's claims. Dalton's disappearance, murder, and the web of lies he left behind created a cascading effect threatening to implicate multiple families, and Britt felt the weight of protecting those kids crushing her. She had gone to Windmere originally to demand that Sidwell rein Dalton in, furious over the sloppy condition of the lab and the danger their covert cold fusion research posed to students and Port Charles citizens alike. She expected a lecture. She expected denials. She never expected Sidwell to respond by shooting Dalton dead in cold blood, right in front of her. That single moment shifted Britt's entire reality. Her life, her reputation, her safety, all of it balanced on a knife's edge. And now, with Sidwell grieving the son he unknowingly killed, that knife felt sharper than ever. Rick Lansing's warning to Sonny proved perfectly timed. Any attempt Sonny made to intervene or shield Rocco, Danny, or Charlotte would only make them look guiltier in the public eye. The optics were already terrible. The disappearance of the very man accusing the teenagers made the situation appear orchestrated, even though Sonny had nothing to do with Dalton's death. Without Dalton available to tell his side of the story, the DA would have to rely entirely on circumstantial evidence, and Rick warned that what people believed could easily overshadow what was true. Chase's evidence against Michael only made the situation more combustible, as it invited the possibility that the DA could shift the entire investigation toward the Corinthos family. And yet, despite this chaos, Britt's value skyrocketed behind the scenes. Very few people knew she had been working directly with Dalton in the PCU lab. Even fewer knew the truth. The research wasn't innocent academic work, it was part of Sidwell's clandestine continuation of Cesar Faison's cold fusion project, a dangerous scientific pursuit with the potential to change the world or destroy it. Emma Scorpio Drake and Gio Palmieri had caught hints of what was happening, and they had told Rocco, Charlotte, and Danny just enough to rope the kids into the disaster unfolding now. But when Nathan West discovered that it was Britt's key fob that granted the kids access to Dalton's lab, his entire perception shifted. He realized Britt had unintentionally enabled everything that followed, the trespassing, Dalton's anger, his accusations, and ultimately the domino effect that led to his death. Nathan connected dots no one else had considered yet, but whether he planned to protect Britt or expose her remained a dangerous unknown. As pressure mounted, Britt came face to face with a terrifying choice: stay silent and let the kids take the fall, or risk her own life by exposing Sidwell's illegal research and Dalton's role in it. She had faced danger before, she had risked everything to save Jocelyn Jacks when no one else could, but this danger felt different. Sidwell wasn't just powerful, he was grieving, unpredictable, and desperate. If he believed Britt was a threat, she wouldn't survive long enough to make a second mistake. Yet the guilt twisting her insides was unbearable. Rocco, Danny, and Charlotte had enough trauma for a lifetime. They didn't deserve to be pulled into a scientific conspiracy fueled by secrecy and ambition. Britt knew she held the key to clearing their names. She was the only one who could describe exactly what Dalton had been doing, why he had lied, and how Sidwell had orchestrated everything. But saving them required betraying Sidwell, the man who had saved her once, manipulated her twice, and now threatened her life without ever saying the words out loud. In the end, Britt knew she couldn't carry this burden alone. She needed Jason, not as a savior, but as someone capable of navigating the treacherous battlefield she had stumbled into. Jason understood danger, secrets, and loyalty better than anyone in Port Charles. Britt's meltdown wasn't weakness, it was the breaking point she needed to reach before finally confessing the truth about what happened when she died, how she resurfaced in Sidwell's orbit, and the horrifying reality of his cold fusion research built on the ashes of Cesar Faison's work. Everything was unraveling, Sidwell grieving a son he didn't know he had, Britt caught between guilt and survival, Jason desperate for answers, Chase ready to expose Michael, Alexis preparing for a courtroom explosion, Rick tightening the legal noose, Sonny warning Gio to stay out of trouble, and the teenagers of Port Charles hanging in the balance. And as Britt stood trembling in Jason's living room, mascara streaked down her face, voice barely audible, she realized that this wasn't just a scandal, it was a war. A war of secrets, consequences, grief, and guilt. And someone, somewhere in Port Charles, was going to pay the ultimate price for Dalton's death. The only question left was, who? The fallout from Britt's near breakdown only intensified as the night dragged on, plunging her deeper into the storm she had spent months trying to escape. Every breath she took felt shaky, every sound sent her jumping, convinced Sidwell had sent someone to silence her before she dared speak another word about the shot that killed Dalton. In the dim light of Jason's penthouse, she replayed Dalton's final gasps again and again, seeing the betrayal in his eyes as he realized Sidwell had aimed the gun at him not as a threat, but as a final judgment. And it haunted her even more knowing the killing blow came from Dalton's own biological father, a truth Sidwell only learned moments before pulling the trigger. That knowledge unraveled him, twisting his grief into rage, fury, and denial that crackled dangerously beneath the surface. Jason watched Britt's trembling hands and tear-streaked face, recognizing that she was the only person who could save the spiraling situation before it consumed multiple families, but she was on the verge of shattering. He knew he had to move carefully, push too hard and she'd collapse, but hold back and she might never confess the full scope of the cold fusion research she'd been dragged into. Meanwhile, Sidwell retreated to the shadows of Windmere, pacing the grand hallway like a trapped animal as Pascal stood silently by, knowing better than to speak during Sidwell's unraveling. Sidwell's tears had dried into an icy mask of determination as he replayed Britt's revelation, Dalton was his son, a sentence that echoed like a curse through his mind. How had Dalton never told him? How had Britt found out before he did? If he had known, would he have hesitated? Would he have lowered the gun? Or would he have pulled the trigger anyway, knowing the consequences of allowing Dalton's mistakes to expose their research? These questions gnawed at him, driving him to madness. Pascal watched Sidwell warily, sensing that his grief wasn't softening him, it was making him more dangerous. Pascal feared that anyone Sidwell perceived as responsible for keeping Dalton's parentage a secret, including Britt, could be the next target. In another corner of Port Charles, Chase's bombshell revelation to Alexis Davis about Michael Corinthos' falsified alibi had begun spreading through legal circles like a brushfire. Alexis was furious, torn between her duty to pursue justice and her instinct to shield the Corinthos-related families from a case that could redefine every power dynamic in Port Charles. If Michael was exposed, the DA would have a field day painting the Corinthos family as conspirators in Dalton's disappearance. Even the slightest hint that Sonny's people had manipulated alibis would become a weapon against them. And Sonny knew it. That's why he pressed Gio so urgently earlier in the day. The boy didn't understand that every word he said could be twisted by Rick Lansing, a man who had built his career on tearing Sonny down piece by piece. Sonny warned Gio that Dalton's death wasn't just a tragedy, it was an opportunity for the DA to pin something on the Corinthos organization, even if they were completely innocent. Gio, emotionally torn after witnessing the chaos Dalton had caused at the PCU lab, struggled to grasp the gravity of Sonny's warning. He was still a teenager, smart but impulsive, and Sonny's attempt to rein him in came from a place of genuine concern. Still, Gio felt overwhelmed, guilty, and confused about what he had seen, what he knew, and what he should keep to himself. He didn't want to end up like Dalton, alone, desperate, and hunted. And Sonny's stern tone didn't help his mounting anxiety. Back at Jason's place, Britt's confession came out in fragments, each one heavier than the last. She explained how she hadn't truly died, not in the way everyone believed. Sidwell had intercepted her disappearance, using her vulnerability, her fear of Faison's legacy, and her desperation to rebuild her life as leverage to enlist her in his cold fusion research project. Britt described the lab hidden beneath PCU, the protocols, the secrecy, and the moments she realized the research had strayed far beyond any ethical boundaries. She confessed that Dalton had grown unstable as the research progressed, convinced rival groups were out to steal their work. His paranoia escalated until he accused Rocco Falconeri of sabotaging the lab, a lie that spiraled until Charlotte and Danny stepped forward, determined to protect their friend by exposing the truth about Dalton's erratic behavior. Britt trembled as she admitted that she, unintentionally, made it all possible by leaving her key fob accessible. When Nathan discovered that the kids used her fob to enter the lab, she knew the entire situation fell squarely on her shoulders. Jason listened without interruption. He didn't take notes, didn't ask questions, he simply absorbed everything, his expression growing more focused with every word. When Britt finally fell silent, Jason stood and quietly locked the penthouse door. She flinched at the sound of the bolt, but Jason turned back with the calmness of someone who knew exactly what needed to happen next. "You're not safe," he told her, voice low but steady. "Sidwell won't stop at Dalton." Britt's lips trembled. She knew he was right. And the truth was, Sidwell had lost more than a scientist, he had lost control. His grief, guilt, and fury were transforming him into an unpredictable threat, driven not by logic but by pain. Britt feared he would blame her for not revealing Dalton's parentage sooner. She feared he would target her for knowing too much. And she feared that Pascal would carry out Sidwell's orders without hesitation. Meanwhile, the political side of Port Charles was igniting. Rick Lansing, already circling the Dalton case like a shark, sensed the atmosphere shifting. Chase's evidence about Michael's false alibi gave Rick ammunition he had been waiting for, an opening to launch a full-scale legal attack on the Corinthos clan. Rick wasn't just interested in justice, he wanted headlines, influence, and the satisfaction of watching Sonny Corinthos squirm under public scrutiny. If Britt came forward, the entire landscape of the Dalton case would transform. But Rick didn't know that yet. All he had was the scent of Corintho's blood in the water, and he was ready to pounce. Alexis, meanwhile, found herself pulled in two directions: uphold the law or prevent Rick from using the case to settle old personal grudges. She paced her office, torn, knowing that once Chase handed her that evidence, she could no longer pretend neutrality. Michael's lie wasn't minor, it was the kind of legal misstep that could shift the entire narrative of Dalton's disappearance. For the first time, Alexis wondered if Michael had been protecting someone. And if so, who? Sonny? Willow? Rocco? Or someone else entirely? The uncertainty terrified her. Back in Windmere, Sidwell's grief morphed into obsession. He ordered Pascal to retrieve every piece of data from Dalton's devices, convinced that someone, Britt, Dalton, or both, had betrayed him. Pascal, though loyal, sensed that Sidwell was losing grip on reality. Sidwell vowed to restore control of the Cold Fusion project, no matter the cost. Dalton died for this work, he muttered, voice cracking. I won't let his death be meaningless. Pascal didn't remind him that he was the one who pulled the trigger. He didn't dare. Elsewhere, Nathan West wrestled with a moral dilemma of his own. He couldn't shake the image of Britt's key fob flashing in his memory, a symbol of her involvement, her guilt, and perhaps her innocence. Nathan had always cared for Britt, even when he didn't fully trust her. Now, with the truth unraveling piece by piece, he questioned whether he should step in and protect her or help expose the entire operation. His heart told him to shield her. His badge told him to pursue justice. Jason, meanwhile, decided Britt needed protection immediately. He placed calls to Spinelli, urging him to dig into Sidwell's digital footprint, Dalton's encrypted files, and any communications linking the research to outside forces. Britt watched Jason work, amazed at how effortlessly he shifted from listener to strategist. She had seen Jason in dangerous situations before, but never like this, calm, methodical, unshakably focused. She realized that if anyone could unravel Sidwell's conspiracy, it was Jason. And that terrified her, because exposing Sidwell meant exposing herself as well. As late night turned to early morning, Britt grew quieter, staring blankly at the floor. She felt like she was floating outside her body, half aware, half numb. Jason noticed. You didn't tell me everything, he said gently. Britt's breath caught. She hadn't meant to hold back, but she had. There was one last secret she hadn't shared. The real reason Sidwell recruited her. The real reason Dalton had become unhinged. The real reason Sidwell shot him without hesitation. And the real reason Britt feared she might be the next loose end. She turned to Jason, voice barely a whisper. When I disappeared, Sidwell didn't just find me. He took something from me. Something I didn't know he had access to. Jason leaned in, eyes narrowing. What did he take? Britt swallowed hard as tears welled again. My father's research wasn't the only thing he stole. Jason froze. Everything suddenly clicked. Sidwell hadn't recruited Britt. He had captured her. And now, all of Port Charles, Sonny, Gio, Michael, Chase, Alexis, Nathan, Rocco, Danny, Charlotte, and Britt herself, stood on the edge of a secret powerful enough to destroy them all. And only Britt knew the final piece. Britt felt her chest tighten as she forced out the truth she had buried for years, the truth that bound her to Sidwell in ways she never dared speak aloud. He took my medical files, she whispered, eyes fixed on the floor as though she were confessing to a crime. Not just the ones from when my symptoms began, but the ones from before. From when I was still a child. Jason's expression hardened instantly, he understood the implications before she finished. Sidwell didn't want me because of who I was, she continued, voice trembling. He wanted me because of what I inherited. My father's DNA. Faison's DNA. The words hung between them like smoke from a detonated bomb. Jason stood there, muscles tensing, because now the Cold Fusion project wasn't just about science or ambition, it was about weaponizing traits unique to Faison's bloodline. Dalton hadn't been simply a scientist gone rogue, he had been the first test subject, a man unraveling physically and mentally under the pressure of a project Sidwell never fully controlled. Jason pieced it together with chilling clarity. Sidwell killed Dalton not because he became a liability, but because Dalton was failing. Sidwell needed someone stronger. Someone biologically compatible with the formulas he had stolen. Someone with Faison's imprint, and Britt fit that description perfectly. She shuddered as the truth hit her anew. Her entire disappearance, her recruitment, her forced partnership with Dalton, it was all part of Sidwell's long game. And now that Dalton was gone, Britt was once again the centerpiece of Sidwell's experiment. She turned toward Jason, tears streaking down her face. "He won't let me walk away," she said, barely audible. "Not now, not after losing Dalton." Jason's jaw locked with determination. "Then we don't walk," he said quietly. "We hit him first."